Two Maple Leafs have impressed at the World Junior Summer Showcase. And where did Austin Matthews rank on ESPN's top 25 list? We'll get into all that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I think I'll be Gametime at some point between now and the end of the Jays season to go and see this team once they start to filter in some of those new prospects that they picked up. I'm excited about what they're able to do at the deadline here.
Yeah, they pretty much traded whatever they could and got it was almost like got whatever they could, but then like the best for baseball, because prospects always are like a weird thing because some teams value prospects most. It's always best to go and look at what the fans think at first, because if you want to get a good gauge of whether or not your team did well in the trade based on the prospects you got in return, go and see what the fan base or people who have covered the minor league teams for these baseball teams, and like the Astros trade with Kikuchi. People are like, oh my god, this is Teoscar Hernandez, Francisco. That was
Liriano. Yeah, it was the Liriano trade all over again.
And I'm like, okay, well, I think Kikuchi might do a little better than Liriano did, but I can get that sense. I can get why people have that sentiment. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's it was definitely a trade that nobody thought was going to happen. First of all, definitely a big win for the Blue Jays. But we're not the Locked On Blue Jays podcast. There is a Locked On Jays podcast. You can go check that out each and every day, Monday through Friday. They've got some new episodes for you. We're the Locked On Maple Leafs podcast here, and there's not a whole lot going on in Leafland right now. It's kind of a lull time in the off season, but the World Junior Summer Showcase is ongoing right now. Dave and a couple of Maple Leafs have been invited and seem to be impressing to this point in the showcase, aren't they?
Yeah, it's something that we can at least look forward to watching during the summer, because it's really the only hockey. Obviously players are doing their little workouts throughout these little rinks around the town. I know a buddy of mine who followed Ryan O'Reilly actually at one of the rinks. But yeah, at least we have like the World Juniors is like a big one this year, especially for Leafs prospects, especially Easton Cowan. Like, this is a big tournament, I think, for him. If he ends up going, I know that's the big if when it comes to Easton Cowan. It's not if he makes the team, he'll make the team. It's will the Leafs actually make him available?
Yeah, I mean, he may end up wearing a seat for Team Canada, and that'd be 2 straight years where the Maple Leafs prospect wears the seat for Canada. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you're happy. I know Chadwick is the other Maple Leafs prospect that's there. He was a 6th round defenseman taken out of the WHL 2 years ago, the same draft as Easton Cowan. And, he's been having a really good camp. I saw some quotes coming out from some people who've been watching, and who was this? The Mark Masters was tweeting about these guys, and Chadwick was saying Chadwick's general manager in Lethbridge was talking about him, and he said that his body positioning is elite, his hockey sense is elite. He just keeps going about his business quietly. And I like to hear that, like a guy who's got the size, he's got the hockey sense to succeed. He's if he can be the skater that you need to be in the NHL in today's world, I mean, this guy might be a bit of a diamond in the rough find for the Maple Leafs deep into 6th round back in the draft a couple of years ago. So you now look at that draft, which, knowing that Wes Clark was a big part of that draft, but we'll get to that in a sec, is they had 3 picks in that draft. 2 of them, look to be decent players to this point.
Yeah, it's again, they don't have many picks, but the ones they've had, the last couple of years have really taken a big step forward, especially getting themselves on the map for these World Junior tournaments. And again, I always say also you got to be a little mindful that yes, you make it to the World Juniors, but it doesn't always necessarily guarantee anything, because we have seen many players go to the World Juniors and be superstars, and then they don't. Justin Pogge, notable one. Thank you for that. I was gonna go with like Tony Esposito. Angelo Esposito.
Angelo, yeah. Tony Esposito was pretty good.
Yeah, he was a pretty good hockey player. Well, I don't know if he played in the World Juniors. I don't even know whether they have the World Juniors all the way back in his time.
He played in the Summit Series. I think that's good enough.
I think that's pretty good. Yeah. So yeah, like
pretty good.
Yeah, I've seen many players who have had like great performances at the World Juniors, and then when it comes to the NHL, I've seen players who don't even make the World Junior rosters go on and have better NHL careers too.
Yeah, I for me, it's more so just like 2 guys that not necessarily the least were ridiculed, but like no one was singing their praises the day they were drafted, and a year later, pretty much like 13 months later, both of them now on the radar for Hockey Canada at the World Juniors. I think it's pretty cool, and if you're a Leaf fan, you got to be happy that some of your prospects are being considered some of the best across the country. Really, ultimately, when you're looking at Easton, Cowan, and Noah Chadwick, and maybe not this year, but maybe next year you can end up, maybe we'll see Ben Damford, factor into things if he doesn't end up making the big club in the next year or 2. There's still a chance for him technically, I guess, this year to still, impress if he has a great start and all. But yeah, it's nice to see the Maple Leafs getting some representation for Team Canada at the World Championships or at the World Junior Championships. We'll see if either of them make the team, obviously. But nice to see them kind of getting some high grades throughout the summer at the very least. Speaking of Canada, you been watching the Olympics, brother?
I've been watching this, obviously the soccer tournament. I've been watching some of the basketball, a lot of swimming. I'm a big swimming buff when it comes to, because the Canadian women are like some of the better in terms of the medal possibilities. Always the women that come up big for those ones.
Summer McIntosh has been, to me, like she's been the story of the Olympics so far for Canada. I mean, there's the soccer story, which is more of a negative, but like in terms of positive stories, for me, what Summer McIntosh has been able to do in the pool has been fantastic. She's got a silver, she's got a gold, and she'll have an opportunity to try and get some more hardware by the end of the Olympics as well. Maggie McNeil will try and get herself something. I saw the women's rugby sevens team actually won silver yesterday too.
That was huge.
Yeah, that was a big. I watched the game. I was very impressed. Took New Zealand all the way down basically to the wire. It was a one try game, as they call it in rugby. It's not touchdowns; they're tries in that sport. Yeah, but I've been impressed. I think there's been a lot of positive developments for Canada at the Olympics. Anyways, let's not get too off topic here talking about the Olympic Games. So why don't we take a break? Let's come back. There's a couple of things around the league actually I want to touch on. A lot of RFAs have started to sign their contracts for next season. The Leafs still waiting to see if they can get their one lone RFA. Actually, they have 2, but one really big one under contract at some point. So maybe we can get into that conversation. And I don't know if you saw this, but the Utah Hockey Club is doing something very interesting this offseason. We'll tell you about that on the other side as well. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime it takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You get last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, comedy, theater events. I did it myself with the Blue Jays, and I grabbed tickets legitimately 40 minutes before pitch, and I got them dirt cheap compared to what they were the day prior. They've got flash deals, they've got zone deals, they got all-in pricing, views to your seats, and the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL. Get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. If you are enjoying the conversation, you're enjoying the podcast, we appreciate it. If you're an everydayer who comes and checks in with us, even through the dog days of summer, we thank you so much for coming and listening to the podcast. You'll notice that there wasn't a podcast released on Tuesday for the month of August. We're dropping down to 3 shows a week. So we're still coming at you with a few shows throughout the week, but there's just not enough content these days to justify a 5-day show realistically. So, we got one for you coming out each and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the rest of the month of August. So make sure that you are subscribed to the Locked On Leafs podcast. Hit the notification bell so you know exactly when those new episodes drop. Leave us a comment down below. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what's going on with the Maple Leafs right now. How are you gearing up for next season? You can let us know down below. And obviously you can find us wherever you get your podcast at for you on the go listeners, and also up on YouTube as well. So this week we saw a lot of RFAs start to get signed. I think last week we were talking about how many were still unsigned, and sure enough, right when we started talking about it, maybe GMs were listening and they're like, oh, right, Dave, thank you for reminding me. I got to go get these guys signed. And all of a sudden, like half of the restricted free agents have now been locked up and they're ready to go for next season. You saw Kirill Marchenko sign his deal. We saw Martin Necas surprisingly sign his deal. Brock Faber ends up signing his RFA contract. There were a number of guys who ended up getting locked in. There's still a couple that remain in need of deals. Both the guys out in Detroit, Nick Robertson, obviously. Alex Steves technically also needs a contract. We always forget to talk about Alex Steves as that pending RFA for the Maple Leafs, but he technically is not yet under contract. I think they'll figure things out with Steves. I don't believe he'll be able to dig his heels in and ask for a large demand. I don't know what's taking along on that one. But the real one, obviously, is Nick Robertson. And it's not so much in commitment to agreement. Nick Robertson want to stay here, right? Like, we heard from Chris Johnston, who's reporting this back, I think it was right around the draft, that Nick Robertson didn't plan on signing a contract with the Maple Leafs. He preferred to get a new, a change of scenery. He wants to go somewhere else to resume his career. Wasn't too thrilled with how things have played out for him, being, cap casualty a couple of years in a row here. And he may not want to remain in this organization. Obviously the guy who drafted him is no longer there either, in Kyle Dubas. So he doesn't have an allegiance either to the general manager. The coach isn't there anymore. Like, there's just a lot, that's different for Nick Robertson that may factor into him wanting a change of scenery. How do you expect for this to play out, though, Dave? Like, as we get a little deeper, because Martin Necas kind of said the same thing, and we had heard that he had wanted to get a trade, and that never materialized. Eventually, he ended up signing a contract, 2-year deal at $6.5 million per. Don't expect for Robertson to get anywhere near that type of money. But do you think eventually he'll kind of tuck his tail between his legs and come back to the Maple Leafs? Or do you think that, at some point we might see a trade come through here?
I think I'm expecting him to be with the team, at least in training camp. And I think they're going to try to find a way to get him to play with them. Just I don't know if any team is really pushing to make an offer right now for Nick Robertson, unless they're just not like teams are just kind of maybe some teams are seeing what they have in terms of cap situations, or if there's a player maybe that they're looking to move and they're still working through that. I just don't right now. I think if the Nick Robertson was going to get dealt, I personally think it would have happened by now with the way this whole thing is kind of played out.
Possibly.
And like the Leafs
If I
hadn't
go,
really addressed it, right? Like they kind of brushed. I wouldn't say brushed aside, but they weren't really like, yeah, I know we're gonna try to figure out something. Like like Brad Treliving wasn't making it a thing.
well, it seems like in his mind, he basically, without saying it, was like, hopefully calm heads prevail eventually. And
Yeah.
Nick Robertson, once the dust settles into the offseason, eventually signs back and, comes and competes for a spot. Like there's a spot for him in the lineup, an everyday spot for him this season. Like you think about what they had last year up in the forward position, and they lost Tyler Bertuzzi. So there's another spot on the left side in the top 9 for him to kind of slide into. So, like there is an opportunity for him to play games here. So it's not as though he's going to be another cap casualty. They're in a decent space, cap space wise, where he can actually be on the roster on day one, and they don't have to worry about carrying only 18 skaters or something like that. So I think that they'll be in a bit of a different space. I'm with you though. I don't think it's necessarily that it's too late and that a trade would have happened by now. I just think the Maple Leafs probably want to play him and give him a shot. Like he was on pace for 20 last year if he had stayed healthy. Or he did stay healthy. If he would have played the whole season, he was kind of up and down, yo-yoing between the minors. But he could be a possible 20 goal scorer for this group. And for a team that lost a Tyler Bertuzzi and didn't add any amount of offense outside of him from a forward perspective, you kind of need someone to come in who can shoot the pill like Nick Robertson. So I don't blame them for wanting to keep him in the fold, knowing that he does have the skill to shoot and to score. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. I am kind of fascinated at this point as to where that goes. Now we've seen a lot of these other guys start to sign their deals. Do we also see Robertson sign that deal? And does this story go away, as kind of quick as it came? Because it will once he signs that contract. If not, possibly a swap. Like there are a couple other RFAs too that are in the same position as Nick Robertson that we could see. Arthur Kelly was a name that had been brought up before as like a 1-for-1 swap. Like we're taken in the same draft, same round. That's a possibility, I suppose, or something similar to that. But that's kind of the one, I guess, question mark we still have between now and the end of the season. I don't think all other heavy lifting is done, I would imagine. So it's really just Nick Robertson, the only one with a bit of a spotlight right now, and what happens with him at this point throughout the rest of the offseason.
That I do think that when he was looking for that way out, or maybe they're just looking for a change of scenery, as I said, I think the Leafs were not. He maybe felt like he was being pushed out because the Leafs were looking at, keeping Bertuzzi, keeping Domi, and it was almost like, well, those guys kind of pushed me down the lineup. We kept talking about where the goal's going to come from. Like if I'm Brad Treliving, I'm telling Nick Robertson, you got a chance here.
Nicky Bobby,
right?
Unless he loses it to not William Nylander, Alex Nylander.
Mm-hmm. True.
Could be someone who could compete for that spot, but yeah.
But I'm hoping you're just maybe hoping that maybe a conversation with Craig Berube will be like, look, we view you as a player that can play for us. Obviously, he's gonna have to earn that spot, and they're not just gonna be like, they would probably say this is your spot to lose. But yeah, I don't see why he would at this point. I don't know why he would want to go somewhere else when there's a new coach coming in. Like take a chance with the new coach and see what he can do. And if it still ends up not being the right fit for you, then you can cut bait at that point.
Yeah, the only thing is, like, he doesn't feel like a fit for Berube either, right? And that was kind of when we heard it. It was like, okay, Berube's now here, and now that's when the rumbling started that he was kind of wanting out. So I don't know if it was the coach that he realized, I don't fit what this guy wants to do. I don't know. Like we haven't heard from Nick Robertson. Obviously, a lot of it's just hearsay, and a lot of it is assumptions, realistically. So maybe we shouldn't be making those assumptions, I guess, since we don't really know. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a fascinating kind of scenario to see what ends up happening with him over the next little bit. All right, I still want to get to that really cool story that's coming out of Utah right now. I think they're doing something innovative and awesome, which I think is something that maybe more sports teams and more hockey teams should do. So we'll get to that in a minute, and gotta talk about this top 25 players list of the 21st century that ESPN put out. Man, nothing grinds my gears like a terribly curated list. That's exactly what ESPN did. So we'll talk about those on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you. I really wanted to touch on this story coming out of the Utah Hockey Club. Did you happen to see what they're offering? Some sort of internship competition that they're offering. Did you see this story?
I saw Elliot Freeman tweet something because like Elliot's obviously only thing Elliot Freeman's been tweeting out is like RFAs, and then he mentions the Utah. I guess yeah, as you're saying, like the competition.
Mm-hmm.
It's very pretty cool. Um, to have something like this, and it's kind of screams to me as a Utah thing. Like you look at owner
Utah
Ryan.
thing? How do we know what a Utah thing is? It's
Well, you look at
it
like
seems like a month
I
old.
look at the owner, right, Ryan
Yeah,
Smith, and just he gives me a different vibe from any other owner in the league. Like
possibly. Yeah.
he screams to me like someone that's going to do things differently than what we've come to expect in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So what they're doing is they're having a summer analytics challenge, trying to seek out kind of new ideas and whatnot. And whoever wins this challenge is going to be awarded a part-time paid
R-
internship
Remote too.
team. Yeah, remote paid internship with the team and kind of work under their analytics staff essentially. So, they're looking for people who have some innovative minds and people who, I would imagine who are out there and they're putting together their charts and putting together their models and whatnot and whoever ends up coming through with one of the better ones, one of the more innovative ones, the Utah Hockey Club kind of hiring ish. Like I know it's considered an internship, but these don't come around too often. So that's pretty cool what they're doing. And I know that there's a lot of really, really smart people out there. I follow a lot of them on Twitter that I look at my Twitter feed and I see what they say and I see the charts they post. And every time, there's some sort of trade or a signing, I go right to their post to see what they're saying about it and what their charts all say or their substacks or whatever it may be. And now there's an opportunity for a remote paid internship with an NHL team with some of these kind of innovative ideas. I think it's pretty awesome that they're giving people this opportunity.
It is. It's awesome because what's the one thing we always say? And Mike, you and I have been through, you know, not necessarily working for an NHL team, but the one prevailing thought amongst people today is getting your foot in the door is such a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I worked
That's
for an ECHL team. Does that count?
yeah, it's a sports organization.
Actually, it was an unpaid internship. Does it still count?
And now we're really just barely scratching this.
Yeah,
I do remember that internship
yeah,
as well. Like that's the thing. when people ask me how to because apparently I'm someone. I mean, because they hear I work in sports. So how did you get there? I'm like, gotta get your foot in the door, right? Go on. I did an unpaid internship for 4 months.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
I don't even know if that's still was there not a law that passed in Ontario that all internships have to be paid? I could have sworn that was a thing.
it was a big talking point. I don't know if it ever actually happened. We have interns at Sportsnet from the different media for different schools. We have obviously Centennial and then the College of Sports Media. So finding a way to get your foot in the door is always it's the toughest thing to do, but it's still one of the better ways, even if it's an internship. I know somebody who did an internship with MLSC. She started off with the Marlies. Now she's working communications PR with the Leafs.
I know exactly what you're talking about, by the way.
Yeah. And she's on the board of Centennial's program.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Shout out JR. And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So that get your foot in the door, people. So this is a good opportunity for people to do that.
100%. Like, just that is a great piece of advice, right? Get your foot in the door, and then once you're knocking on the door, once they let you in, make sure that you and any opportunity you get at that point, run with it. Like, that's what I always say to people. Like, I got a lucky break in my career. Obviously, I'm well aware of that. But once I got the break, I ran with it. So if you're one of the lucky people who end up with this opportunity, run with it. Like, do everything you can to show that you are worth keeping around far after this internship opportunity, and hopefully it could parlay into a job within the analytics team, and that's your way of getting into the NHL, which lots of people want to get there, right? It's a everyone wants to work in sports, right? So yeah, I thought it was a really, really cool thing that's going on there. All right, really quickly, we got to talk about the top 25 players of the 21st century ranked by ESPN. So I first and foremost, the first couple obviously makes sense, right? Like, we're talking 21st century, so from 2000 onward, and you can only use the data points from 2000 onward. So anything before that doesn't necessarily get used. So anyways, Sidney Crosby very clearly is the number one player. Alex Ovechkin very clearly the number two player of this century. That makes a lot of sense. I even think them putting Connor McDavid at number three makes a ton of sense as well. He is the greatest hockey player in the world and has been now for the last, 5-6 years. And he's only been in the league for about 8 years. So McDavid for sure, especially coming off of the cup final that he just had, definitely deserves to be in there at number three. He's accomplishing things that guys by the name of only Lemieux and Gretzky have been doing recently. So makes a lot of sense. Does Patrick Kane at number four seem a little high to you, though? Like, yeah. I don't know if I'm the Kane hater, but him at four just seems a little high.
What I always say is if you had to pick between Patrick Kane or Nathan MacKinnon, who are you picking in their prime?
MacKinnon.
It's Nathan MacKinnon. Now, I don't like to hate on a player because of the position they play. Like, Patrick Kane's a winger, McKinnon's a center. But what MacKinnon has done and has been able to, I understand, like, Patrick Kane has been fantastic his whole career. It kind of took MacKinnon a little bit of time to get there. But like, we're talking about Nathan MacKinnon as a top three player in the NHL, right? In terms of forwards, you can, right? Especially.
Top
so
four,
I think
top four at the very least, top five for sure. Yeah. No argument, top five.
Right. So, like, Patrick Kane is obviously deserving to be on the list. I just think at four, I have an issue with him at four.
Yeah, for sure. He's definitely one of the most 25, most accomplished players of the 21st century. I mean, you look at the dynasty that he was, a part of in Chicago, like him and Jonathan Toews really, obviously took that team to where they had to go. He's an MVP, 3-time Cup champion, won the Conn Smythe in 2012, won an Art Ross. And so like there's obviously a long list of accolades for Patrick Kane to be considered. I'm not even that saying that he's not even top 10. He could be top 10. I just think 4 seems a tad high. One of the things that always shocks me is how late into the 2000s that Nicholas Lidstrom played, to the point where he was actually ranked in the top 5 on this list, because he played all the way through until 2011. 2011, 2012, or 2010, 2011. It's wild. He played like 10 years in the 2000s. That's crazy to me whenever I think about that. He played so long.
The longevity of his career, like, again, it's hard to say he was an underrated player, but he was severely underrated because of how long he played. And just like in his final few years, he was averaging almost 24 minutes a game.
At like 38, 39 years old.
41 years old, he was averaging just under 24 minutes a night. And finished top 5 in Norris voting.
Wild.
At age 41.
Wild. Absolutely insane what this guy was doing. And
he also won a Norris Trophy at age 40 as well.
Yeah, 40 years old. Like, the guy won the Norris Trophy like every year. Like that
he
was
won it 7 times.
Nick Lidstrom was disgustingly good. Disgustingly good. And really, I mean, you look at the demise of the Detroit Red Wings, it really all started when he retired. Like, he retired, and all of a sudden, the Red Wings stunk. That's kind of what ended up happening. Let's be honest here. He was so good. Now, really quickly, I guess, since I don't want to spend too much time here, I suppose Austin Matthews, the lone Maple Leaf to make this list, makes sense, I would say. If you think there should be someone else, but I think Austin's probably the guy at this point. Mm-hmm. At number 15, what do you think in that ranking as the 15th best player of the 21st century? I'll tell you the players he's sandwiched by. Jumbo Joe at 14, and then Erik Karlsson at 16. Does that make sense?
The Jumbo Joe one to me is a little like, I know Joe Thornton put up a lot of points. He was obviously a Hart Trophy Art Ross. I think that was 3 years in a row. So like, you can make the argument. I just feel like Austin Matthews has, I think, edged a little. I would have him a little higher than Joe Thornton on the list, in my opinion.
The thing is, though, like, Thornton played 22 out of the 25 years, whereas Austin's only played 8.
Right.
So like that does come into this a little bit, I suppose. But again, like, if you're gonna have a guy like McKinnon and a guy like McKinnon was ranked 6, I think there should be an argument for Matthews to be a little bit higher on the list. Like, I would think that Matthews has been more accomplished than Steven Stamkos at this point. Like, I get it. Stamkos, was the first guy in a while to hit 60 goals. He's won the Stanley Cup a couple times as a captain. But like, let's be honest, I still think that Austin Matthews, in the shorter amount of time, outside of, the Stanley Cups, is the better player. The better player over Steven Stamkos.
That's the key part there. The better player. And then sometimes I hate when team things are brought into it, because like Steven Stamkos played for a great Lightning teams, right? But there was the one cup final he didn't even play. He played one shift, right?
What a shift it was, though.
It was probably one of the greatest shifts I've ever seen on watching. But like to me, if you're looking at what Stamkos has done in his career, then look at what Austin Matthews has done. Austin Matthews has pushed himself past what Stamkos has done in terms of what you've seen
won
every year.
2 Rocket Richards since 2008. Matthews has won at least 2. Has he won 3?
Well,
I always won at least 2. But like in half the amount of time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, some of these lists are a little questionable. What I think is probably the weirdest one is Jonathan Quick making the top 25. This one I think is just it's ESPN, and it's an American goalie, so like that's where I'm looking at that honestly. But how the hell could you possibly put Jonathan Quick as the top 25 player of the century? Not just of like, that 4-year run where he was amazing, the entire century. Like, you're gonna tell me that he was, hold on, who else was up there as a goalie throughout this time? So Vasilevsky, okay, makes sense. Flower was up there.
Lundqvist.
Broder, Lundqvist. Is that it? So Broder, Lundqvist, Flower, Vasilevsky. And then the next best goalie of the 2000s, you're going to get Jonathan Quick? What? Really?
Yeah, I personally don't see it either. He's a good goalie, but when you're talking about what makes the the elite all-time goalies, it's the longevity of what Broder, what Lundqvist, the consistency each and every year. Jonathan Quick, like he got to a point where the Kings were just brutal with him.
Oh, I'm just coming to a realization.
Mike's got
I'm coming to a real.
For those listening on audio, Mike, I realize when Mike's got something like strange is going on with him, where he puts his fingers on his head and his eyes have this weird like, what am I reading right now?
brother, Jonathan Quick comes in ranked at number 25, right? Vasilevsky, Flower, Broder, and
Lundqvist
are the other players. You can't tell me there's not one other goalie in particular that deserves to be there over Quick and Lundqvist, or Quick, and to me personally, Flower and Vasilevsky. The biggest omission of all, honestly, on this list. I just realized that the fact that Jonathan Quick is on this list at 25 over this specific player just means that this entire list is a farce. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Who could you be talking? I mean, there's many goalies I would kind of throw onto that.
No, there's one. There's one goalie that to me deserves to be there over Vasilevsky, over obviously Quick, over Marc-Andre Fleury. There's one guy.
Are you talking about Dominic Hasek or are you talking about Patrick?
Think about it's 2000s, right? Where it's 2000s. Actually, there's two goalies. There's two goalies that deserve to be in there over him. Jeez Louise. Oh, my God.
Belfour?
No.
Belfour was like 90s.
Yeah.
2000s.
Come on, Dave. I'll give you one more guess.
Carey Price.
You're going to tell me that Jonathan Quick has been a more impactful player, is a better.
I'm telling you, this is Stanley Cup bias because his team won a cup.
Oh.
Even though Carey Price used whatever ounce of athletic ability he had left to string that Canadiens team to the Stanley Cup final.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably one of the more impressive goaltending runs I had ever seen. Way more than Jonathan Quick, in my opinion. Jonathan Quick had a great team in front of him.
And in what world is Jonathan Quick also? In what world should he ever be ranked ahead of Roberto Luongo? Also,
did I not say Luongo?
No, you didn't actually.
I thought I said Luongo.
Still,
maybe I had it in my head. Yeah, no. Like, we're talking about a guy who won an Olympic gold medal. We're talking about a guy who had, again, another one of those consistent runs of just being a great goaltender.
Dude, Ryan Miller, I think, is a better U.S. goaltender than Jonathan Quick. They definitely took a lot of team aspects and like wins into this. Like one of the things that they talk about with Jonathan Quick specifically, career leader in wins and shutouts among U.S. born goalies.
That's by
Two-time Stanley Cup champion.
two wins over Ryan Miller, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. He never won. I don't even think I got to look this up. Did Jonathan Quick, was he even ever on the ballot when it came to
A Vezina?
Bully of the Year? Yeah, Vezina. I'm gonna look this up because it'll on Hockey Reference they have that information readily.
He finished as a finalist in 2011, 2012. He was a top 5 in 13-14, top 3 in 15-16. He won a Jennings in 17-18.
Okay. So only twice was he ever like on the ballot.
He was on the ballot. Sorry, he was on the
Well,
ballot
not on the
4
ballot.
times. 4 times on the 5 times, but we're talking about like top 5
3 times.
3 times.
Yeah. Which is what the ballot is. The ballot's the top 5, I believe, right?
Well, they
so he's
sometimes
only been on the ballot 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then because where he finished 8th and 9th and 7th, that's not considered. Because you get 5, you get to write your top 5 every year.
Yeah.
So he never made the top 5 in most of the years. Yeah. Absolutely ludicrous that this guy was ranked as a top 25 in the 21st century. Absolutely absurd. He's not even top 5 goalies in the 21st century to me, let alone top 25 players. Craziness. Absolutely craziness. All right, Dave. Yeah, I think that'll do it for us here today. Good stuff. Fun chat. Got a little bit of haywire there at the end talking about that list, but it just when lists grind my gears, man, I can't take it. It gets me, and that was just such a bad list. I didn't even realize when I first looked at it that like Price wasn't on it, and now I know that Carey Price was not on this list. It's just absurd. Absurd, especially like Jonathan Quick over Carey Price. Come on. Wild stuff. All right, buddy. That's going to do it for us here today on the pod. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Friday. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.